We are getting into the parameters in our code now with exercise 3.2. So I just wanted to review about parameters and why you would use them. So first of all, you'd use a parameter in a method, and the methods that you would use them in, you can use them in some methods that are created within Java that you don't need to make yourself, but we can also make our own methods. And we do that to make our code more efficient. And we combine that repetitive code. Anytime you start seeing repetition in your code, then you know you need to make a method so that you can shorten your code and make it more clear to people who are reading and using your code. So first of all, some methods have no parameters. So in the textbook, they had the example of adding some blank lines. And when you look at this, you can see so it's called 3 blank lines because we're adding 3 blank lines. And we always want to make sure that we are picking some type of name for our method that makes sense so that when you're reading it, if I said, this method's going to be 3 blank lines, you could imagine that inside there would be code to make 3 blank lines, which is exactly what this does. And the empty parentheses here means that there are no parameters being sent to this particular function. You don't need to send anything to do 3 blank lines. This one, however, you do use parameters. So some methods do have parameters, and this one has a name of called product. And if you hear the word product, then you're probably thinking, well, you could think of 2 different things actually. So this is going to be the product from multiplication is what I intended. And for this one, in order to multiply 2 numbers together, I need to have 2 numbers. And so I need to tell the type of parameter it's going to be. So I'm setting an integer because I can't multiply a string, and then I need to give it a name. And again, I'm trying to give logical names that make sense. You have to do this for all of your code. And this one's going to be called num1 because it's the first number. And then there's going to be a second integer, and I tried to give it another logical name, which is called num2. And down here, I made a new integer and you made a new variable in this method, and it's called answer. And the answer is going to be multiplying num1 times num2. So you need to think of parameters as values that you send to your methods. So sometimes I've done code, which we're not at this point yet, where you're doing objects. So I did things that look like little ghosts in Pac-Man. And the ghosts have different colors. And so, but to draw the ghost, it's the same format each time, but depending upon which ghost I was drawing, I would send the parameter of a different color down so that the ghosts would be different colors. So in this one, this is my main code, and we know that we always start with the main. And basically what I'm doing in this code is I'm invoking the product method. So I'm like, hey, okay, this is my main code. You're going to call product, and you're going to send 2 parameters down. And you're going to call it again and send 2 different parameters down. So the first number, the order that I put these numbers in when I invoke the function, when I call the function, matters because the first number is going to go to the first parameter, and the second number goes to the second parameter. So you want to make sure you put them in the correct order. With multiplication, it doesn't matter, but in other times your code, it will matter. And so what happens here is num1 is equal to 3 on the first line of code, and num2 is equal to 2 on the second line of code. And so the answer is going to be 3 times 2, which would be 6. And then I do a print line statement. It says the product of 3 and 2 equals, and then it would say 6. It would put a period, and it would go back up to the main, and it's going to run my code again. This time it's going to send 7 to number 1 and send 8 to number 2. And it's going to go through this part of the code, then it will go back up, and it's going to stop because there's nothing else in my main function. So now we're going to move over to NetBeans and see what it looks like there. Here I am in NetBeans, and I have the code just as listed in the slideshow, and I'm going to hit play here, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, so it looks like my code is working just as I imagined it. So the product of 3 and 2 equals 6, and the product of 7 and 8 equals 56. The periods are right, my spacing is right, so everything looks good in my code. The other thing that I want you guys to notice when you're in NetBeans is making sure you align everything. So do you notice that in the class, these 2 methods are in my main class parameters, and there's the main method that runs first, and then the product method that I call. And do you see that these methods are aligned? So the start of it and the end of it, and the start and the end are all lined up. And then all of the code that goes within this main method is also lined up. And all of the code that goes in the product method is also lined up. So that's the indentation you have to be really careful about to make sure your code is indented properly. So you can see, it's very easy to see by glancing at this code that this code is inside this method and this code is inside this method. The other thing that I think is neat is if I click on num1 here, then you can see it shows me all the times it's going to highlight where num1 is called. If I highlight num2, then it's going to show me where num2 is being called in the code. So I find that to be very helpful when I'm trying to debug my code, and I just wanted to make sure you are all aware of that. Good luck on the exercise.